Hi, I'm Taylor Williams, and this is my Miss Silveri final for AP Lit. The prompt I chose was prompt 1, You Can Leave Home All You Want, but Home Will Never Leave You, by Sansaria Tate. And I will tell you how it has a considerable influence on individuals and how it has illuminated the work I read as a whole. The topic I chose to touch on from that quote was home as a state of mind. And I have several examples of this in past and present years of learning in Miss Silveri's class. My first example, since it's one of the most recent, was Beloved. Beloved shows how Sethe and Paul D always remember Sweet Home, but how their memories are still buried in their mindsets that they recall on them repeatedly. I saw this illuminating the work as a whole because it makes you question the freedom of a man and how freedom first starts in the mind. Although Sethe had gotten away from Sweet Home, it seemed as though she relived moments and pieces of it as if it was trapped inside her mind in the story. It makes her question that freedom and what it was to her, and in the end it seems as if the death of Beloved was a freedom from the life she was living and the mindset of the possibilities of what would happen to Beloved if she were to have grown up the way Sethe had. And this kicked in her instincts, and thus she killed Beloved. My second example is Jacob Holt's American Pictures from my 11th grade year in Miss Silveri's class, and that showed me how that even when you leave your home or your original lifestyle, the memory stays with you, and how you've been trapped in a mentality for so long you start believing in it, and it affects the people, how it affects people still today, with the mindset of oppression on the black community and poverty itself as a whole on a regular community, and how people can leave slavery but still be trapped inside of its confines in the mind because you have been trained to live a way of poverty and hate, thus creating the individuals today, the homeless and the ghettos of America. My third example I chose was Good Hair by Chris Rock. It showed how the black oppression goes even further and how it coerces itself on the minds of women and the black community to think that their natural hair or their hair was bad hair, and the more straight, silky like texture of hair or white hair was good hair. He dug into the way black communities go through tortures and mayhem just to achieve the standard of so-called good hair, and how women can go bankrupt over weave. It may sound silly, but in the end, it was the oppression of the women themselves and how they spend their money on the hair to achieve this standard. And as Al Sharpton said, hiding their oppressions daily. It showed how the black woman in the community as a whole, in a way, is masking who we are because of a mentality set forth in our minds from years long ago. This in the end showing that a home can be a state of mind or oppression, and that's how it affects the individual. How it elaborates the work as a whole is because in Beloved, without her having that mindset of oppression or that sort of state of home, she probably would have never tried to kill Beloved in the first place, and she would have never had to relive those moments over and over again. And American Pictures, it affected the people, or the work as a whole, because the people were still set and trapped inside their slave-like mentalities, and it affected them because their whole lives were based around a certain standard, and it was hard for them to cope in the real world, or the ever-changing world, pretty much per se, as American citizens. And they grew up in poverty, ended up in poverty and hating one another, and their friends, their families, over things that have been inflicted on their minds. In Good Hair by Chris Rock, it affects the work as a whole because it shows how our community uses cover-ups to try to mask oppression instead of facing their oppressions head on. And instead of dealing with the problems, we rather make the problems worse, and how we need to improve on those problems and such, so it doesn't hurt or hinder the individual themselves. Now moving on to part 2 of my AP final. Question 1, how have I grown as a learner? I've grown as a learner in the fact that I now have a natural hunger to dig deeper and look for more than basically beyond textbooks and average school learning. In order to dig and to use my knowledge I obtain to help others, and in turn grow to help others, and thus in turn give back to my community. Question 2. What was the most important idea generated in this semester's discussions? I think it was that you can be your own worst enemy, in the sense that your mind is your freedom, and you have the power to control it. You have to use how you think for yourself in order to find your identity, and what you do with it and how you use it to help others, and how to have your voice be heard. Question 3. What are your beliefs? What are the values and the beliefs that inform this idea or argument? I say it's because all year we've been trying to find our voices. In order to do that, we first had to have the hunger to learn and to know our strengths and our weaknesses. We also had to learn as a unit, as a whole, that we have problems and assess our weaknesses there. And once that we saw them and kept an open mind, we learn how to dig deeper within ourselves and questioning, never stopping at the surface, only to dig deeper so the person and find out that the only person stopping you from overcoming your weakness is yourself. Question number 4. How do you think that this issue is viewed by those from whom you disagree? I think they can say what we were learning, what I've obtained wasn't learning, and that we had to just channel it, and you cannot get those kind of concepts from our literary readings and what we viewed as a class. How can you, question 5 was, how can or how will you use what you learn outside these 4 walls of the classroom? I plan on helping my community little by little and show my community pretty much how to keep an open mind and always know when to recognize our strengths and our weaknesses and use them to overcome our weaknesses and better ourselves as people. And since I am an artist, I always keep an open mind, and my work will always reflect my visions and how my take on the world is. But keeping an open mind, I will be able to accept the changes and the differences and give back to my community the eye I have for art and how I see the world in a more elaborate fashion, as more reaching towards my viewers and my people pretty much as a whole. And all I can say in Miss Olvida's class is never a dull moment, and that the things I've learned from it is that no matter how big life gets, pretty much, you can always find a way to learn more. Every day you have to learn something in that class. Elaborating a little bit more on how I can use what I learned and beyond my four walls of the classroom, aside from my artistic views. I can help my community see their strengths and their weaknesses, their differences and their similarities, and possibly one day help them help themselves, help the people better themselves in the way that they can always help someone else. The feeling of helping someone else should be fulfillment alone, without needing any other further feedback. And that's my AP final. Again, I'm Taylor Williams, and thanks for listening.